I wasn't looking for a new job when the letter came. At 45, I had learned that quiet work and reliable pay were worth more than ambition. My last job as a groundskeeper at the Methodist church had ended without bitterness, just budget cuts and apologies. I told myself I'd take a few months to rest, but rest never sat well with me. The letter arrived on a Thursday, cream-colored paper, wax seal stamped with an unfamiliar sigil, an ornate bee enclosed in a circle of thorns. Inside, Bloodstone Hill Cemetery requires a caretaker. Duties include nightly maintenance and observance of protocol. Lodging provided. Compensation, $4,000 per week. The sum made no sense. I thought it was a mistake until I noticed the signature at the bottom. Mr. Alaric Duval. The handwriting was elegant, almost calligraphic. Beneath it was a number. When I called, the voice on the other end was calm and polite, though something about its tone felt deliberate, as though each word had been chosen for balance. "Yes, Mr. Carter," the man said. "We've had your name recommended to us. Faithful, discreet, and a man of the cloth's favor. I believe you'll find Bloodstone Hill quiet." Quiet. That was the word that decided me. The drive into the foothills was a journey into a deepening hush. The nearest village to Bloodstone Hill was just a few houses scattered along the side of the road. Their windows dark, their porches empty. I didn't see a single soul as I passed through in the late afternoon light. It was as if the place had been drawn in by a careful artist, and then forgotten. The cemetery itself was reached by a single winding lane, canopied by ancient gnarled oaks that choked out the sun. When I emerged into the clearing, the sight stole my breath. Bloodstone Hill was not a field of simple headstones. It was a city of the dead, a collection of marble mausoleums and ornate crypts that spoke of forgotten grandeur, all nestled on a commanding rise overlooking the misty valleys below. The air was cold and carried the clean, damp scent of cut stone and decaying leaves. I was met at the wrought iron main gate just as the last sliver of sun vanished behind the peaks. He emerged from the shadows between two grand family tombs, a man so pale he seemed to be carved from the same marble that surrounded us. He was dressed in lavish Victorian attire, a tailcoat of deep black, a waistcoat of silver brocade, and a cravat tied with an antiquated precision. He moved with an unnerving, fluid grace, making no sound on the gravel path. "Mr. Carter," he called, his voice smooth, musical even. "You found us without trouble." "I did," I said. "You must be Mr. Duval." He inclined his head. "I am. Welcome to Bloodstone Hill, Samuel." Up close, he looked ageless. Neither young nor old, skin the color of alabaster, hair the shade of wet ash. His eyes were gray, but with a strange depth that seemed to reflect no sky. He led me up the path between rows of tombs, explaining little. The marble here was different from any I'd seen. Faintly luminous, like something that had absorbed starlight instead of sunlight. "Our residents are long settled," he said. "Your duty is to ensure they remain undisturbed, and that our traditions are respected." We reached a small caretaker's hut at the far edge of the cemetery. A sturdy wooden building with a single window and a padlocked basement door. Duval handed me a brass keyring and an envelope sealed with the same wax sigil as the letter. "You will reside here. Think of yourself not as a caretaker of the dead, but as a facilitator of the night. These are the rules," he said, his tone shifting from courtesy to gravity. "Follow them, and your service will be rewarded. Fail them, and the grounds will fall into unrest." He handed me the envelope. Inside, written in the same fine hand as before, were 4 rules. "Read them aloud," Mr. Duval instructed. "I must hear you give them voice." I cleared my throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the stillness. "Rule 1, I began, my voice rough against his polished tone. "Every evening at 11 p.m., you will open all the crypts except for the one bound by silver chains. Once this is complete, you will proceed directly to this hut. Close all curtains, lock the door, and wait for no less than 30 minutes. My eyes flickered up to him. His expression was impassive. I continued. "Rule 2. After the 30 minutes have passed, you will take the box of bottles from the basement and place one bottle inside each open crypt. Do not linger. Do not look inside. Rule 3. 40 minutes before sunrise, you will return to this hut. Close all curtains, lock the door, and wait until the sun has fully cleared the horizon. You will not leave a moment sooner. Rule 4. Only after sunrise may you go out and close all the crypts. I finished reading and looked at him. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. I looked up from the list. Why would I be opening the crypts at all? Mr. Duval's silver eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something ancient and stern in their depths. Because those within do not rest in the way you understand rest, Duval said softly. They are particular about their habits. His tone invited no argument. Do we have an understanding? I thought of the debt, of the quiet life I longed to return to one day. I thought of the profound silence of this place. Yes, Mr. Duval, we have an understanding. Excellent. He turned and walked to the door, pausing on the threshold without looking back. Your duties begin tonight. I suggest you familiarize yourself with the latch on each crypt. They can be stubborn. And with that, he stepped out into the deepening night, swallowed by the darkness between the tombs, as if he had never been there at all. I was alone with the rules, the silence, and the certainty that I was now the sole living resident of a world I did not understand. The silence in the hut after Mr. Duval's departure was not merely an absence of sound. It was a physical presence, thick and watchful. I spent the first hour memorizing the rules on the vellum, the elegant script seeming to pulse in the flickering lamplight. At 10:30 p.m., a deep resonant chime echoed from a clock I had not seen, its source hidden somewhere among the crypts. The signal. Stepping back into the night was like submerging myself in cold black water. A low-hanging mist had crept in from the valleys, coiling around the ankles of the marble tombs. In my hand, I carried a heavy brass lantern, and the iron master key Mr. Duval had left on the table. The first crypt, the Ainsworth family mausoleum, had a latch that was indeed stubborn, crusted with age and something darker, a rust-like residue that stained my fingers. The iron door swung inward with a groan that shattered the stillness, revealing an impenetrable darkness within that smelled of old dust and dried roses. I moved down the line, a solitary figure in a sea of the dead. Each groan of metal, each screech of protesting hinges felt like a profanity. I kept my lantern beam low, focused on the mechanisms of the locks, following Rule 1 with a devotion that felt like my only anchor to sanity. My path took me past the one crypt I was to avoid. It was smaller, older than the others, built from a rough black stone. The silver chains were not decorative. They were thick as my wrist, wrapped around the entire structure in a complex interlocking pattern, pulled taut with a tension that seemed unnatural. The padlock holding them together was massive, wrought in the shape of a fanged serpent eating its own tail. A cold radiated from it, a deep penetrating chill that had nothing to do with the night air. I hurried past. By the time the last latch clicked open, my hands were trembling. Not from fear exactly, but from the sense that I was performing a ritual whose meaning I couldn't yet see. I returned to the hut, slammed the door shut, and drew the curtains, ensuring not a sliver of glass was exposed to the outside world. I collapsed into a worn armchair, my breath pluming in the suddenly frigid air of the room, and stared at the face of my pocket watch. At precisely 17 minutes past 11, I heard a soft scraping sound, like stones sliding against stone. Then came the footsteps. They were not all the same. Some were light, almost tentative taps on the gravel. Others were heavier, the solid, deliberate tread of someone who owned the ground they walked on. I heard the rustle of fabric, not the cheap nylon of my own jacket, but the heavy sweep of brocade, the whisper of silk. A low murmur of conversation drifted past the hut, too faint to make out words. The language itself was fluid and alien, its cadence all wrong for human speech. My knuckles were white where I gripped the arms of the chair. I held my breath, praying the 30 minutes would end. Then, a voice spoke, right outside the window, separated from me only by the thin curtain and the pane of glass. It was a woman's voice, cultured and clear, yet tinged with a hollow resonance, as if speaking from the bottom of a well. "The new keeper is cautious," she said. Another voice replied, "Duval would not have chosen a fool. Silence is a virtue." A soft, melodic laughter followed, a sound that froze the marrow in my bones. I pressed myself deeper into the chair, my eyes fixed on the second hand of my watch, counting each agonizing tick. They were talking about me. They knew I was in here. The rules were not just a guideline. They were a shield. As the 30 minutes came to a close, I forced myself to move, my body stiff with tension. The basement was a small, earthen-floored room that smelled of damp earth and something else, something coppery and sweet. The box was there, as promised. A simple wooden crate filled with dark glass bottles, each one stoppered with black wax. They were cool to the touch, the liquid within sloshed thickly. Stepping back outside was a test of will. The cemetery was silent again, but it felt different. A watchful, occupied silence. I moved from crypt to crypt, my every sense screaming. I did not look inside. I would place a bottle just beyond the threshold on the stone floor and retreat. In one crypt, I heard a soft, drawn-in breath as I approached. When I reached the last tomb, I paused. The bottle in my hand suddenly felt heavier. My lantern flickered once, then steadied. From inside the open crypt came a faint sound, a whispering shuffle, like silk brushing marble. Something inside shifted, a subtle motion, like the turn of fabric. My hand tightened around the bottle. A pale shape appeared just beyond the threshold, the suggestion of a human form, barely visible, moving like a reflection in water. I froze, every instinct screaming to run, yet something deeper kept me there, staring. I set the bottle inside the crypt, unbroken, and stepped back. Then the voice came, clear as thought. "Thank you for your service," it said. The words were soft, almost kind. I turned and walked back to the hut, my pace measured but my heart hammering. I followed Rule 3 to the letter, locking myself in for the long wait until dawn. Sleep was impossible. I sat in the chair, listening to the occasional soft sound from outside, until the first gray light of morning painted the edges of the curtains. Only then, with the sun firmly above the horizon, did I emerge to close the crypts. Outside the crypt, where the voice had thanked me, was an old tarnished silver coin, resting neatly on the gravel. I left it where it lay. I was the keeper, not a servant for gratuities. But as I closed the final crypt, the one bound in silver chains, I heard a new sound from within. A low guttural growl, followed by a single powerful blow against the inside of the stone door that made the massive chains vibrate with a spectral hum. I understood then, with a clarity that settled deep in my soul, that this was not just a job. It was a vigil, and I had just begun my watch. The first month was a trial by silence and shadow. I fell into the rhythm of the rules as a man might fall into a deep well, with an initial terrifying plunge, followed by a slow acceptance of the descent. My days became inverted. I slept through the bright, empty afternoons, the sun a distant, irrelevant star, and awoke as twilight bled into the valleys. My world was defined by the 11 o'clock chime and the creeping approach of dawn. The initial paralyzing fear did not vanish, but it transmuted into a state of hypervigilant reverence. I was no longer just Samuel Carter, groundskeeper. I was a functionary in a nocturnal pageant, whose purpose I could not fathom. The rules were my liturgy, and I performed them with the devotion of a monk. I started paying attention to the unique features of the crypts. The Ainsworth mausoleum door always stuck, requiring a firm shoulder. The Carrington vault's lock was finely machined and clicked open with satisfying precision. I never saw the occupants, but I began to recognize their preferences. The crypt where I had been thanked, the Abernathy tomb, always seemed the warmest, and on the third night, I found the silver coin was gone, replaced by a single perfect white rose, its petals beaded with cold dew. I left it there. I was learning the second unspoken set of rules, the rules of etiquette. The voices and footsteps outside the hut had become a familiar, albeit unnerving symphony. I learned to distinguish the light, almost skittering steps of the younger ones from the steady gait of the ancients. Their conversations were mostly fragments, spoken in a dozen languages, some I vaguely recognized, others that sounded like the wind through dead leaves. The treaty in St. Augustine remains contentious. Modern furniture is so ugly and clumsy, people are steadily degrading. The new world is so dreadfully loud. They spoke of time in scales I could not comprehend, of places and events that were history long before my grandfather was born. They never threatened me, but their awareness of me was a constant low-grade current in the air. I was part of the scenery, yet distinctly separate, the living machinery of their night. My second month at Bloodstone Hill, I made a mistake. One evening, as I rushed to draw the curtain in the hut, the old brittle fabric caught on a nail and tore. It left a narrow vertical slit of exposed window, no wider than my finger. The compulsion to look was a physical ache. The rules said not to, but the human need to see, to know, was overpowering. Crouching, I pressed my eye to the sliver of glass. The mist had cleared, and a full moon bathed the cemetery in an ethereal bone-white light. The paths were not empty. Figures moved with a languid, unhurried grace. A woman in a gown of deep crimson silk, its style a centuries out of date, stood by the obelisk. Her skin was so pale it seemed to glow. As I watched, she turned her head with a smooth avian motion and looked directly toward the hut. Her eyes were not silver like Duval's, but a solid, lustrous black that reflected no light. I dropped to the floor, my heart hammering against the floorboards. I had not been seen, I told myself. I could not have been. But the next night, as I placed a bottle in the Abernathy crypt, a voice from the darkness said, "The curtain is torn, keeper, a lapse in vigilance." The tone was not accusatory, but instructive, like a master pointing out a flaw in a student's technique. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night. They knew. They always knew. The following day, I used my own money, driven from the nearest town 20 miles away, to buy a heavy black woolen blanket. I nailed it securely over the window, ensuring no light could escape, and more importantly, no sliver of the outside night could find its way in. The lesson was learned. The rules were absolute, and their spirit was as important as their letter. The work was lonely, but the isolation suited my nature. The salary was indeed exceptional, and for the first time in my life, my bank account grew instead of shrank. I purchased books, histories, philosophies, texts on architecture, and read them by lamplight, my mind expanding in the quiet hours. I was becoming a different man, shaped by the silence and pale aristocracy I served. The only thing that continued to frighten me was the chained crypt. It was the dark heart of my vigil. Every night, as I passed it, I felt that same penetrating cold. Sometimes I heard nothing. Other times, there was a slow, rhythmic scraping, like a claw being dragged along the interior stone. Once, there was a low, mournful weeping that lasted for hours, a sound of such profound and ancient despair that I found myself standing outside the hut, not in fear, but in a strange, pitying sorrow. Whatever was in there was not a mere monster. It was a tragedy. At the end of my first year, Mr. Duval appeared again. He was exactly as I remembered him, a statue that had deigned to move. He did not ask for a report. He simply stood in the doorway of the hut as dusk broke, his silver eyes scanning the tidy room, the patched curtain, the stack of books on my table. "You are still here, Mr. Carter," he stated. He gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. "We find your service adequate." It was the highest praise I could have imagined. He turned to leave, then paused, glancing toward the black-shrouded crypt in the distance. "You hear it," he said, not as a question. "The broken one." "Sometimes," I admitted. "A reminder," Duval said, his voice dropping to a whisper that seemed to drain the warmth from the room, "of what we all could become without the covenant, without the rules." He left then, and I was alone with a new chilling understanding. My job was not just about opening doors and delivering bottles. It was about maintaining a fragile peace. The rhythm of my vigil had deepened, and with it, the weight of my responsibility. The second year settled upon Bloodstone Hill with the quiet certainty of a season's turn. The initial, sharp edges of fear had been worn smooth by routine, replaced by a profound and solemn sense of purpose. I was no longer an interloper in this world of marble and moonlight. I was its steadfast custodian. The rules were no longer a shield against terror, but the sacred text by which I ordered my existence. I could anticipate the subtle preferences of the residents. The Abernathy crypt now frequently left me a single rare wildflower, while the occupant of the Carrington vault preferred his bottle placed just on a small obsidian plinth to the left of the entrance. On the anniversary of my second year, Mr. Duval came for me in the deep, pre-midnight darkness. He found me oiling the hinges of the Ainsworth Mausoleum, a task I had taken upon myself to ensure my duties were performed with flawless silence. "Your diligence does not go unnoticed, Samuel," he said. "We don't give our trust lightly. It must be earned drop by drop, over decades. You, however, have proven a swift and deep well of reliability." He gestured for me to follow him, leading me away from the familiar crypts toward the northern edge of the cemetery, a section I rarely patrolled. There, shrouded by a copse of weeping willows whose branches trailed like skeletal fingers on the ground, stood the iron gate. It was not part of the perimeter fence, but a freestanding structure of black wrought iron, twice my height and arched at its peak. Its design was complex and unsettling, a latticework of thorns and serpents that seemed to shift in the peripheral vision. He found me oiling the hinges of the Ainsworth Mausoleum, a task I had taken upon myself to ensure my duties were performed with flawless silence. "Your diligence does not go unnoticed, Samuel," he said. "We don't give our trust lightly. It must be earned drop by drop, over decades. You, however, have proven a swift and deep well of reliability." He gestured for me to follow him, leading me away from the familiar crypts toward the northern edge of the cemetery, a section I rarely patrolled. There, shrouded by a copse of weeping willows whose branches trailed like skeletal fingers on the ground, stood the iron gate. It was not part of the perimeter fence, but a freestanding structure of black wrought iron, twice my height and arched at its peak. Its design was complex and unsettling, a latticework of thorns and serpents that seemed to shift in the peripheral vision. Rule 3. Do not speak first. If a guest greets you, you will reply only, "The way is open." You will offer no other words. Rule 4. You will never, under any circumstances, count how many enter or how many leave. Rule 5. Before the first hint of dawn touches the sky, you will lock this gate. He held out a heavy padlock, crafted from what appeared to be solid silver, cold and unnaturally heavy in my palm. The locking mechanism was a complex puzzle of twisting metal. "The lock recognizes only the keeper's hand," Duval explained. "It will open and close for no other. Do you understand the totality of these instructions?" "I do," I said, the words a vow. The first full moon arrived 3 nights later. The air was electric with a tension I had not felt since my earliest nights. The usual residents seemed more subdued, their movements more purposeful, as if in anticipation of a grand event. At 5 minutes to midnight, I took my position before the iron gate, the silver key cold in my hand. The forest beyond was preternaturally still, not even an insect daring to chirp. The hidden clock began to chime midnight. On the 12th and final stroke, I inserted the key. The lock did not click, but rather sighed open, as if releasing a long-held breath. I pulled the heavy gates inward, the iron groaning with a sound that spoke of immense age. Then, as instructed, I stepped back, bowed my head, and fixed my eyes upon the gravel at my feet. I heard them before I saw the hems of their garments enter my field of vision. There was no sound of footsteps. They moved with a silence that was more profound than the night itself. I saw the bottoms of rich velvet cloaks, the frayed edges of robes that might have been spun in another millennium, the polished tips of boots that had not seen daylight in centuries. They passed in a slow, stately procession. Dozens of them, perhaps more. One pair of feet, clad in delicate slippers of silver thread, paused directly before me. A scent of frost and night-blooming flowers filled the air. "The keeper holds the way," a voice, melodic and impossibly ancient, stated. It was not a question, but an observation. I felt every muscle in my body tighten. Duval's third rule rose up in my head like a litany. "The way is open," I replied, my voice rough but clear, as the rule demanded. There was a soft, approving hum, and the silver slippers continued on their soundless path. I lost all sense of time. The parade of hems, boots, and silent feet seemed endless. I followed Rule 4 with religious fervor, refusing to let my mind even begin to tally their numbers. To count them felt like it would be an impertinence of cosmic proportions, an attempt to quantify the infinite. Finally, the flow ceased. The silence returned, deeper and more profound than before. I waited, my body trembling from the sustained tension. Only when I was certain no more would come did I step forward, grasp the cold iron of the gates, and swing them shut. The silver lock clicked into place with a finality that echoed in my soul. As I turned to begin my bottle delivery, I saw Mr. Duval standing at the edge of the willow copse. He did not speak. He merely offered me the barest nod of acknowledgement, a gesture that held more meaning than any words of praise. I had passed a test far greater than I had understood. 5 years passed. Nights bled together. I grew accustomed to the rhythm, the exactness of midnight, the patience of standing for hours with my eyes averted. Sometimes, I thought I heard faint music drifting from beyond the gates, violins played underwater, or bells chiming in a language older than the hills. Other nights, there was nothing but fog. The monthly opening of the iron gate had become as routine as the nightly bottle delivery. A solemn ritual I performed with the unthinking precision of a heartbeat. The residents of Bloodstone Hill had become my silent congregation. I knew their habits, their unspoken preferences, the subtle hierarchy that existed among them. I was a part of their ecosystem, a trusted warm-blooded fixture in their cold, eternal world. One night, Mr. Duval arrived at my hut accompanied by a gentle rain. He sat in my worn armchair, a stark, elegant contrast to the humble surroundings, and accepted a cup of tea he would not drink. "You've served well, Samuel." His voice was calm as ever, but softer somehow, as though he was speaking to a confidant rather than an employee. Faithful hands, steady eyes. "It has been a long time since one of your kind endured this long." "Samuel," he began, his silver eyes holding mine, "you have earned truths. It is time you understood the full nature of your vigil. You've wondered what sleeps here in Bloodstone Hill. I've learned not to ask questions I'm not meant to understand," I said. He smiled faintly. "And that, Samuel, is why you've survived. Those you serve are not ghosts, nor demons. We are the family. We walk by night, feed as nature demands, and in return we maintain the balance that mortals can no longer perceive. This ground is sanctuary, not sepulcher." I felt no shock, only a deep, resonating confirmation, as if a long-held question had finally been answered. The pale skin, the nocturnal existence, the contents of the bottles. It all slid into a final chilling place. "Vampires?" I murmured, the word tasting foreign in my mouth. Duval inclined his head. "A crude term. We prefer kindred of the blood. But yes, your legends are not entirely false." He explained their covenant, a strict code of conduct that forbade the taking of human life. They subsisted on donated blood, on the vital energy of animals, on something they called the essence of silence. They were, as he put it, civilized. His gaze drifted toward the window, in the direction of the chained crypt. His expression tightened, a flicker of something akin to pain, crossing his ageless features. "Most of us have learned restraint, discipline, but not all. There is one among us who cannot be trusted," Duval continued. "He is old, older than any of us now here. In life, he was a musician, a man of beauty of soul, but the centuries hollowed him, and he began to drink beyond need, beyond reason. His hunger devoured what was left of him." "What happened to him?" I asked quietly. "He broke the covenant. He reveled in the hunt. He lost his humanity entirely, becoming a feral thing, a predator in its purest, most monstrous form. Mr. Duval stood and walked to my workbench, where I kept my tools. Among them was a small lacquered box of dark wood, inlaid with mother of pearl. It had been left on my doorstep a year prior. I had never opened it, sensing it was not a gift, but an item placed in my custody. "Open it," Duval instructed. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a small, exquisite music box. It was crafted of a pale golden wood, with a simple silver clasp. "This belonged to him," Duval said, holding it out. "The music carries the echo of who he once was. It is the only thing that can lull him back to slumber." He placed the box in my hand. It was impossibly cold, heavier than wood should be. "The rule is simple," Duval continued, his voice taking on a tone I'd never heard before, something between reverence and warning. "If the chained one rises, wind the small music box 3 times and place it before the crypt. Do not stop it until he sleeps again. When the melody ends, lock the lid, chain it once, and step back 12 paces." I repeated it aloud, more to anchor myself than to reassure him. "Good," Duval said. "You must never falter. The music binds him to memory, his last tether to what he was. If it stops before he yields, nothing will restrain him." I looked from the beautiful, innocent object to Duval's grim face. "You want me, a mortal, to subdue him? We cannot hurt him. The covenant forbids it," he repeated, a profound sorrow in his voice. "Our presence only enrages him further. It reminds him of what he was and can never be again. But you are the world he rejected. And this melody, it is an echo of that world. It is the only thing that can reach the shred of humanity, buried deep within the monster." Duval turned to go, but paused. "Do not fear him, Samuel. Pity him. He is what we would all become if we lost the rhythm that keeps us sane." After he left, I sat for a long time in the silent hut, the rain my only companion. I looked at my hands, rough, mortal, finite. I was being entrusted with the containment of a being so powerful and terrible that his own immortal kin dared not face him. The weight of it was immense. I finally understood the true nature of the arrangement. The high pay, the isolation, the rules, it was all preparation for this. I was the only soul in this city of the night who could approach the one creature everyone else feared. The mundane routines of opening crypts and gates were a disguise for this. The core of my purpose, to stand as the fragile barrier between the civilized darkness and the chaos that lurked at its heart. The chained crypt was no longer just a prison. It was a loaded weapon, and I alone held the safety. Year 10 arrived quietly, like a soft turning of a page. The word felt both monumental and insignificant in the timeless air of Bloodstone Hill. I was 55, though the deep solitude and nocturnal rhythm had carved a permanence into my being that felt ageless. The feral one in the chained crypt had remained quiet, his presence a dormant volcano I circled each night. The music box sat on my mantelpiece, a silent sentinel awaiting its purpose. In the autumn of my 10th year, a subtle but palpable energy began to permeate the cemetery. The family moved with a new anticipatory grace. Mr. Duval appeared one afternoon, a rare and disconcerting sight under the diluted sun, his expression one of solemn excitement. "The Crimson Festival approaches, Samuel," he announced, his voice carrying a reverent tone I had never heard before. "It is a sacred event held once every 50 years. The family from across this continent will reunite here. You will see the festival in its full glory. Your role is crucial," he explained. "You will prepare the grounds, polish every marble surface until it gleams like bone under the moon. Line every path with crimson candles, and hang this above the main gate. It declares the sanctuary is active." He produced a heavy bronze sigil from a velvet pouch, a complex symbol of intertwined serpents and a single unblinking eye. He presented me with a new set of instructions, this time written on a thick cream-colored card that smelled faintly of incense and old parchment. The rules felt different, more ceremonial. The work was immense. For 2 weeks, I labored during the day, my world temporarily righting itself to the sun. I scrubbed marble until my arms ached, the white dust coating my clothes and hair. I placed hundreds of thick red candles in iron sconces driven into the earth. The sigil, when I hung it, seemed to hum with a low resonant power, making the air around the gate vibrate. When the night of the festival finally arrived, the cemetery seemed to hold its breath. Midnight drew near, and the first figures appeared, emerging from the shadows beyond the main entrance. Hundreds of them, men and women in fashions spanning 3 centuries. Revolutionary war coats, Victorian ball gowns, roaring 20s flapper dresses. All silent, all pale, their eyes gleaming with a faint ruby light in the reflection of the countless crimson flames. The only sound was the whisper of exquisite fabric on stone. I stood at my post near the tool shed, a humble figure in my simple clothes, following the new rules to the letter. Rule 1. The wine is sacred. Serve it, but do not drink it. I carried a heavy silver ewer, filled with a dark viscous liquid that smelled of metal and midnight, refilling the crystal goblets they held out. Their hands were cold, their nods of thanks silent. Rule 2. When the music begins, do not move. The music was summoned, soft at first, a haunting melody that seemed to thread through the stone and fog alike. I froze in place. My body became a statue as the notes curled around the grounds. The pallid guests stood in silent reverence, their eyes faintly gleaming under the moonlight. Some of the family spoke to one another in low, echoing voices that carried a resonance I could feel in my chest. Then, a tall figure in a Confederate officer's uniform paused as he passed, his eyes like smoldering coals. Samuel Carter, my name softly uttered, reached me like a ripple through water. Rule 3. If one of them speaks your name, bow but do not answer. Only Duval may address you directly. I felt a prickle of fear, but I did as the rule said. The wine service continued. I moved the trays without faltering, placing each goblet exactly where it belonged. No glass slipped from my grasp, no step faltered. I could hear the faint hiss of the candle flames and the soft murmur of fabric against marble. Each movement measured, each gesture obedient. As the eastern sky began to lighten from black to deep indigo, the gathering drew to a close. Rule 4. When the feast ends, gather the cups but leave the last one on the altar. I moved through the crowd, collecting the empty goblets. In the center of the cemetery, on a simple stone altar I had cleaned that very afternoon, a single full goblet remained. I left it there, its dark contents shimmering in the candlelight. The hundreds of guests began to depart, fading back into the shadows as silently as they had come. The remaining local family gathered around the altar. Mr. Duval stood before them, raising the final goblet. His voice, when he spoke, cut through the pre-dawn silence like a shard of ice. To the covenant, he intoned, to the family reunited, and to our keeper. His silver eyes found me in the crowd. Samuel Carter, may his heart beat eternally. It was a benediction, a sign of recognition. 100 pale faces turned toward me, their ruby gazes holding a deep, unnerving respect. In that moment, I was no longer a servant or even just a warden. I was part of the architecture of their world, a keystone in the arch of their ancient secret society. The festival ended with a profound silent acknowledgement that echoed louder than any applause. I had not just performed a job, I had participated in a sacrament. 13 years, the quiet rhythm of my existence at Bloodstone Hill had become the entirety of my world. The memory of the Crimson Festival had settled into a warm crimson ember in my mind, a testament to my accepted place within the strange tapestry of the family. The storm hit without warning, a sudden rush of wind and rain that rattled the windows of the caretaker's hut and whipped through the cemetery paths. Lightning split the sky in jagged bursts, illuminating the graves in stark ghostly flashes. I was checking the crypts as usual when I heard it, the unmistakable rattle of chains. My blood ran cold. It was coming from the crypt bound in silver. A low, mournful wail followed, vibrating through the stones beneath my feet. The lid of the crypt shuddered violently, then burst open with a force that shook the marble steps. From the darkness inside, it crawled. Something monstrous, something that had once been human, but had lost all resemblance to it. Its limbs were twisted and spindly, tipped with blackened talons that scraped against stone. Eyes like molten fire glowed from a face frozen in feral rage. Its mouth opened wide, and a chorus of inhuman growls tore through the stormy night. It lunged at one of the marble crypts, rending at the stone as if trying to tear it apart. I froze for a heartbeat. My mind raced, but I forced myself to breathe, remembering the rules Duval had drilled into me years ago. If the chained one rises, the music box. I bolted toward the small hut on the edge of the cemetery. Rain soaked me instantly, chilling me to the bone, but I ignored it. My hands fumbled over the wooden box hidden under the counter, and I pulled out the small music box. My fingers shook as I wound it 3 times, the delicate mechanism clicking under my touch. The melody began, soft but piercing, threading through the storm like a fragile tether to some forgotten time. I placed the music box carefully in front of the rampaging creature. Its head snapped up, talons slashing the air, eyes burning brighter than the lightning above. As the melody played on, the creature began to change. The hunch in its shoulders softened. The furious light in its eyes dimmed, replaced by a dawning, agonizing confusion. A low, shuddering sob racked its frame. It began to weep, thick black tears cutting tracks through the rain on its monstrous face. The music was reaching the man buried within the beast, and the memory was torture. The song slowed, the notes stretching. The creature's weeping subsided into exhausted whimpers. As the final note hung in the air and faded, it looked up, its eyes meeting mine for a single terrifying second. There was no hate there now, only a bottomless eternal sorrow. Then, it turned and shuffled back into its crypt, dragging the broken chains behind it. I moved quickly, locking the lid, chaining it once, and stepping back exactly 12 paces, heart still hammering like a drum in my chest. The crypt was silent. The chains rattled one final time, then stilled. A calm voice broke through the storm behind me. "You've done what no mortal has done in a century." I spun, heart leaping, and saw Duval standing in the rain, expression as composed as ever, pale face untouched by the storm. "Your courage, your adherence to the rules, has proven your worth beyond servitude. You have faced the abyss, and you have reminded it of the man it once was. You are no longer merely a caretaker, Samuel." I stood in the rain, water streaming down my face, heart still racing. I felt more than relief, a shift in the invisible hierarchy that had always separated me from them. I was no longer merely a mortal intruder into their eternal domain. Duval did not say another word. He simply stood with me in the storm, until the first hint of gray dawn pierced the clouds. In that shared silence, the last vestiges of my status as a servant evaporated. I was now irrevocably their keeper. 15 years. My own status had been similarly reforged. Now I am Samuel the Keeper, a title bestowed not by a piece of paper, but by the silent collective will of the family. They interacted with me differently now. A nod from the expensive leather shoes individual was no longer a mere acknowledgement, but a gesture of respect. The one who left wildflowers now placed them not on the path, but on the small bench outside my hut. The night of my 15th anniversary was unseasonably warm, the air thick with the scent of jasmine and damp earth. I was polishing the iron gate, a monthly ritual of mine, when I felt a presence behind me. It was Mr. Duval. He looked exactly as he had 15 years ago, pale as alabaster, dressed in that impossibly elegant Victorian attire, hair perfectly combed, eyes glinting with calm authority. "Samuel," he said, his voice softer than I had ever heard it. "Walk with me." He led me away from the gate, down the main path, our footsteps the only sound in the profound stillness. "The arrangement between our kind and yours is ancient," he began, "but it is not common. A mortal with your temperament, your loyalty, your unwavering adherence to structure. It's rarer than any gem. Every century, he continued, the family extends a singular invitation. It is offered to one faithful human, a keeper who has proven their worth beyond all measure. It is an offer of transcendence, an offer to shed the fragility of mortality and take a permanent place within the covenant. You are offering to make me like you? I whispered, the words feeling alien on my tongue. I am offering you a place in the family, he corrected gently. The blood is but the method. The result is eternity and a permanent role in maintaining the balance you have come to understand. 15 years of memories flashed before my eyes. The initial terror, the comforting rigidity of the rules, the profound peace of the Crimson Festival, the terrifying triumph of quelling the feral one. This cemetery was my home in a way no other place had ever been. The family was my community. To leave would be to return to a world noise of fleeting relationships and meaningless labor. It would be a kind of death. I thought of the wildflowers on my bench, the respectful nods, the shared silence during the storm. I thought of the music box and the profound sorrow in the feral one's eyes. At that moment, I did not hesitate. I accept, I said, my voice clear and steady in the quiet night. Mr. Duval nodded, a slow, grave motion. Then the covenant is extended. He produced a small, silver dagger from his coat, its blade so thin it seemed to be made of light. With a motion too swift to follow, he pricked the tip of his own pale finger. A single drop of dark, viscous blood welled up, shimmering with an inner light. This is the first step, he said. The world will tilt, Samuel, but you have never been afraid of the dark. I leaned forward and let the single drop fall onto my tongue. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. A fire erupted in my veins, a burning clarity that swept through me, scouring away the mundane. The world fractured and reassembled itself in hyperreal detail. I could hear the roots of the trees drinking from the water table deep below. The scent of jasmine was an overwhelming symphony, the texture of the marble crypts a tactile poem. My mortal senses, which I had thought so keen, were revealed as dull, clumsy instruments. I gasped, doubling over, as the burning sensation spread. A glorious, agonizing rebirth. The last thing I saw before my vision swam was Mr. Duval's hand on my shoulder, steadying me, and the faint, approving smile on his lips. The transformation was not a single event, but a meticulous unraveling and reweaving of my very being. Mr. Duval became my guide. He taught me to control the influx of sensory information. He showed me how to move with their silent, fluid grace, my own footsteps becoming whispers on the gravel. At the end of the week, the transition was complete. The last vestiges of my mortal fatigue, the dull aches in my joints, the vague hunger in my stomach, all were gone, replaced by a serene, potent stillness. I looked at my reflection in the polished marble of the Ainsworth Mausoleum. My face was my own, yet not. The lines of worry and hard living had softened into a timeless permanence. My eyes, once a simple brown, now held a faint silver sheen in their depths, a reflection of the new power that slept within. I was no longer the keeper of Bloodstone Hill. I am its son. The long, silent vigil of my mortal life had simply been the prelude to an eternal watch. For the first time, I had become the purpose itself.